The pistol shot cracked through the frozen air like breaking glass. Eloan Blackwell braced herself against the carriage wall, heart hammering as masked highwaymen surrounded them on all sides. 3 of them. Maybe 4. The leader's voice cut through the December wind, cold and merciless. Everything. Now. They didn't ask twice. Her coachman tried to resist. Brave, foolish man, and received a pistol but to the temple for his trouble. He crumpled into the snow, blood seeping dark against white. Eloan's scream died in her throat as rough hands yanked open the carriage door. "Please," she managed. "I have nothing of." "Shut it." The leader gestured to his companions. "Strip the carriage. All of it." They took her reticule. Her modest trunk with its carefully packed belongings. Her mother's pearl necklace, the only thing of value she owned. And finally, with cruel deliberation, the fur-lined cloak that was her only defense against the killing cold. "This too, love." One of them grinned as he tore it from her shoulders. "Very nice. Fetch a pretty penny." She stood in her thin traveling dress, shivering violently as the temperature plummeted around her. The sun was already sinking, casting long shadows across the desolate road. No village. No shelter. Nothing but frozen wasteland in every direction. The highwaymen vanished into the tree line like smoke. Then, hoofbeats. Thundering. Close. A dark-haired man on a massive black horse charged from the woods, greatcoat billowing behind him like raven's wings. The highwaymen scattered, but they were already gone, swallowed by the forest. He arrived too late. Caspian Wolf, Duke of Thornmere, dismounted in one fluid motion and surveyed the devastation with slate-gray eyes that missed nothing. Not her coachman unconscious in the snow. Not the ransacked carriage. Not her inadequate dress or the way her lips were already turning blue. "You're hurt," he said. It wasn't a question. Eloan wrapped her arms around herself, teeth chattering so hard she could barely form words. They took everything." His gaze flicked to the darkening sky. When he looked back at her, his expression was unreadable. Controlled, calculating. "The nearest inn is 12 miles north. You won't survive the journey." She tried to protest, but her voice failed. Her legs were already unsteady. "There's a hunting lodge 2 miles west. My property. We go there now, or you freeze to death on this road within the hour." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. "Choose quickly, miss." Blackwell. Her pride demanded she refuse, but her body was already betraying her. Trembling, weakening. Eloan Blackwell. He dismounted and strode toward her with the confidence of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Well, Miss Blackwell," he said, wrapping his greatcoat around her shoulders, "tonight we survive. Tomorrow we deal with propriety." "Alone?" "With you." The scandal of it cut through even her hypothermic haze. That's your only option." His eyes held hers unflinching. "Unless you'd prefer to die virtuous and frozen in the snow. I assure you society won't care either way." The brutal honesty of it stole what remained of her breath. He lifted her onto his horse before she could protest further. She weighed nothing to him, clearly, and swung up behind her. His body was solid warmth at her back, his arm an iron band around her waist as he spurred the horse forward. Eloan told herself the tears on her cheeks were from the wind. Wolf's Keep appeared through the gathering dusk like something from a nightmare, or a dark fairy tale. The hunting lodge was larger than she'd expected, stone and timber, surrounded by skeletal winter trees. But no smoke rose from the chimney. No lamplight glowed in the windows. It looked abandoned. The caretaker. Eloan's voice was barely a whisper. "Should be here." Caspian's tone had gone flat. "Dangerous. Unless my instructions were ignored." He dismounted and lifted her down with impersonal efficiency, as if she were a piece of fragile cargo. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground. His hand shot out, steadying her with a grip that was both gentle and unyielding. "Can you walk?" Pride made her nod. Reality made her stumble. He caught her without comment, then simply swept her into his arms and carried her to the entrance. Kicked the door open. The lodge was dark, cold, silent. Bloody hell. He set her on a bench near the massive fireplace and moved through the space with controlled fury, lighting lamps. Bastards gone. Left nothing but scraps. Eloan's gaze tracked around the main room. Rustic furniture. Hunting trophies on walls. A doorway leading to what must be a bedroom. Everything covered in a thin layer of dust. How long? She couldn't finish. Couldn't ask how long they'd be trapped here. Until the storm passes. He was kneeling at the fireplace now, coaxing flame from kindling with practiced movements. Could be days. Days. Alone. With a stranger. The fire caught, casting flickering shadows across his face. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, eyes that revealed nothing. He looked carved from the same stone as the lodge itself. "There's one bedroom," he said without looking at her. "One bed. The floor is stone. The temperature will drop below freezing tonight." He paused, jaw tightening. "I'll sleep in the chair. You take the bed." Relief flooded through her, though she hated herself for it. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet, Miss Blackwell." He finally met her eyes, and something in his expression made her pulse stutter. "We'll both likely regret this before dawn." He moved to check the meager provisions the absent caretaker had left. Half a wheel of cheese, some dried meat, a few bottles of wine. Not nearly enough for multiple days. "Your Grace." "Wolf," he interrupted. "Or Thornmere, if you must be formal. But I think we've moved beyond your Grace. Don't you?" A bitter edge crept into his voice. "Seeing as we'll be sharing living quarters for the foreseeable future." She pulled his greatcoat tighter around herself. It smelled of leather and pine and something indefinably masculine. "I didn't ask for this." "Neither did I." He poured wine into 2 tin cups with sharp, precise movements. "I was writing to clear my head before." He stopped. Didn't finish. Before what? His eyes cut to hers, hard as flint. "Before I make the biggest mistake of my life." The weight of those words hung in the air between them. Eloan accepted the wine he offered, their fingers brushing. The brief contact sent electricity up her arm, awareness, danger, something she couldn't name. What mistake? Marriage. The word was barely more than a snarl. "To a woman I don't love. For a fortune I desperately need." She found herself responding in kind. "I was running from the same thing. Marriage to a man I despise. Arranged by my father before he died. I'd rather freeze than marry Silas Crow." Caspian's eyes narrowed. "Crow the merchant. You know him." "I know of him. He's—" Another pause. "Ruthless. Ambitious. Twice your age at least. And cruel." The word escaped before she could stop it. Something shifted in Caspian's expression. A flash of what might have been protectiveness before control slammed back into place. "Then you were right to run. Even if it means—" She gestured at the lodge, at the impossible situation. This. Even then. They stared at each other across the firelight. 2 people fleeing their futures. 2 people trapped together by fate and weather and desperation. The storm began to howl outside, rattling the windows like skeletal fingers. "Get some rest," Caspian said finally, turning away. "I'll keep the fire going." Eloan moved toward the bedroom on unsteady legs, pausing at the threshold. Wolf. He looked back. Why did you help me? You could have left me on that road. His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, because leaving you there would have haunted me more than sharing this lodge with you, Will. It wasn't comfort. But somehow it was enough. She closed the bedroom door between them. Outside, the temperature continued to plummet. And the long night began. Eloan woke to silence. Wrong silence. The kind that meant the fire had died. She sat up in the darkness, heart pounding. The bedroom was glacial, her breath visible in the faint moonlight bleeding through frost-covered windows. She'd fallen asleep wrapped in Caspian's greatcoat and every blanket she could find, but even that wasn't enough now. The cold was alive, vicious, seeping into her bones. Then she heard it. A violent shiver from the main room. Another. The sound of teeth chattering so hard it seemed they might shatter. Wolf. She stumbled from the bed, legs weak, and pushed open the door. He was still in the chair by the dead fireplace, curled in on himself like a man trying to disappear. His lips were blue. His hands, normally so controlled and precise, were shaking uncontrollably. He didn't even seem to register her presence. God, you're freezing. She dropped to her knees beside him, touching his face. Ice cold. Why didn't you wake me? Fine. The word was barely comprehensible through chattering teeth. You're not fine. You're dying. Terror clawed at her throat. She'd never seen anyone this far gone. Get up. Now. Can't move. Eloan made a decision that would have scandalized her father, her absent aunt, every rule of propriety she'd ever been taught. She hooked her arms under his and pulled. He was massive, solid muscle and bone, but desperation gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. Help me, she gasped. Please. Something in her voice must have penetrated the hypothermic fog because he stumbled to his feet, leaning heavily against her. She half dragged him to the bedroom, every step a battle. When they reached the bed, he collapsed onto it like a felled tree. Eloan didn't hesitate. Couldn't afford to. She climbed in beside him and pulled every blanket over them both, then pressed herself against his back, wrapping her arms around him. Sharing heat. Sharing warmth. Sharing the only thing that might keep him alive. His body was rigid at first, trembling violently. Miss Blackwell, this is survival, she finished, holding him tighter. Be scandalized tomorrow. Right now, just breathe. Minutes passed. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the shaking subsided. His breathing evened. Heat began to build between them. Friction, biology, the desperate mathematics of two bodies fighting cold together. Better, she whispered. Yes. His voice was rough, strained. Thank you. They lay in silence, hyper-aware of every point of contact. His back against her chest, her legs tangled with his, her breath against his neck. The intimacy was electric, terrifying, impossible to ignore. I was supposed to propose tomorrow, he said suddenly. To Lady Helena Ashford. My father arranged it. Her family's shipping fortune will save Thornmere. Eloan's arms tightened fractionally around him. Do you love her? I've met her twice. She's beautiful, intelligent, cold as winter steel. A pause. She'll make a perfect duchess, and I'll make her a terrible husband. Why? Because I can't give her what she deserves. Affection, attention, anything beyond duty and obligation. His voice dropped. I rode out here to escape, To have one more day of freedom before the cage closed. I understand, Eloan said quietly. I was running from my own cage. Silas Crow. My father promised me to him before he died. Called it securing my future. I call it selling me to the highest bidder. Caspian shifted slightly, turning his head toward her. What did your father give him? Beyond your hand. My name. My family's parliamentary connections. My complete and utter compliance. Bitterness flooded her voice. Crow doesn't want a wife. He wants a political asset. We're both prisoners, Miss Blackwell. His words hung in the darkness between them. Yours just has visible walls. The truth of it settled over them like the blankets. Heavy, inescapable. Two people running from futures they never chose. Two people trapped together by violence and weather and fate's cruel sense of humor. Eloan, she whispered, if we're sharing a bed to survive, you should probably use my name. She felt rather than saw his slight smile. Caspian. Outside, the wind began to howl. The storm that had been gathering all night finally broke with full force, battering the lodge with ice and fury. They would not be leaving tomorrow, or the day after. They were trapped. Dawn arrived gray and bitter. Eloan woke to find herself still wrapped around Caspian, her cheek pressed against his shoulder blade, one leg thrown over his. At some point in the night, he'd turned and pulled her close, his arm heavy across her waist. She should move. Should create distance before he woke, and they both had to face what this meant. But she was warm for the first time since the robbery, and his heartbeat was steady beneath her palm, and for just one more moment she let herself pretend this wasn't temporary. Wasn't scandal. Wasn't impossible. His breathing changed. Consciousness returning. They separated simultaneously, awkwardly, neither meeting the other's eyes. I should check the storm, Caspian said, voice carefully neutral. He crossed to the window and went very still. How bad? Eloan asked. We're not leaving today. Or tomorrow. He turned, face unreadable. The ice storm is worse than I've ever seen. We're trapped here for at least 2 more days. Maybe 3. 2 more nights. 2 more impossible choices between propriety and survival. The food. Her voice was steadier than she felt. We'll need to ration carefully. Their eyes met across the small room. Everything unsaid hung between them. The forced intimacy, the confessions, the awareness that had nothing to do with cold and everything to do with the way they'd fit together in the darkness. Last night, she began, was survival, he finished. Nothing more. They were both lying. And they both knew it. The storm showed no mercy come morning. Rain lashed the windows in sheets, and when Caspian tried the door again, the warped would refuse to budge. They were still prisoners. Without darkness to hide behind, the silence between them felt unbearable. Eloan watched him pace like a caged wolf, his jaw tight with frustration. Tell me about your brother, she said finally. He stopped. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the window, his reflection ghost pale in the rain-streaked glass. Adrian was everything I'm not. Warm. Open. He cared about people. Really cared, not just as duty required. His voice roughened. 5 years ago, there was a fire in the tenant cottages. I was in London, attending some meaningless social obligation. Adrian ran into the flames to save the families inside. He got them out. But the roof collapsed before he could. The sentence died unfinished. Eloan's throat tightened. That's why you're marrying Helena. The money to repair the estate. It's penance. I wasn't there when he needed me. His knuckles whitened against the windowsill. I won't fail my duty again. These people, his people, deserve better than what I am. But I can at least give them security. By sacrificing yourself. It's not a sacrifice if I was never going to have that kind of happiness anyway. He turned, and the bleak certainty in his eyes struck her like a blow. I'm not built for warmth, Eloan. Adrian was the sun. I'm just winter. The ache in her chest surprised her with its intensity. She understood that bone-deep conviction of unworthiness too well. My father used to say I was unmarriageable, she heard herself confess. Too wild. Too opinionated. A burden he couldn't wait to be rid of. The old words still had teeth. He was relieved when Crow made his offer. Finally, someone willing to take me off his hands. Caspian crossed the room in 3 strides. Your father was a fool. She tried to laugh it off, but his sudden proximity stole her breath. You think I'm being kind. His voice dropped low, almost fierce. I'm not. You're extraordinary. Eloan. Fierce and alive and so damned brave it terrifies me. Any man with eyes could see. He stopped himself, jaw clenching. You're not a burden. You never were. His hand lifted, hesitated, then cupped her face with devastating gentleness. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she forgot how to breathe. The air between them felt electric, charged with everything unspoken. She could see the exact moment he realized how close they were. Close enough that she could feel his breath against her lips, close enough to... He jerked back as if burned. I'm sorry. The words came out hoarse. That was inappropriate. The loss of his touch left her cold. Caspian. We should find something to occupy ourselves. Separately. They spent the day in careful avoidance, but night came regardless. The bed waited, inevitable as the tide. They lay in the darkness again, but everything had changed. She was achingly aware of every point where their bodies almost touched. His breathing carefully controlled. The heat radiating from his skin. She knew he wasn't sleeping. Knew he could feel the same electric current arcing between them in the dark. Neither spoke. Neither moved. But beneath the blankets she felt his fingers brush hers. Just once, barely a whisper of contact, before he pulled away again. The wanting was becoming impossible to ignore. Propriety was a performance, and Edmund Vane had front-row seats. Every glance required calculation. Every word was weighed for impropriety. Caspian called her Miss Blackwell with cold formality. She addressed him as Your Grace, and kept 3 feet of distance between them at all times. It was suffocating. Edmund watched it all with predatory patience, eyes tracking every movement like a cat studying mice. Dinner was a special torture. They sat at the small table while Edmund carved the pheasant with theatrical domesticity, playing gracious host in someone else's lodge. I've taken the liberty of sending word about Miss Blackwell's situation, he said, apropos of nothing. To her intended, Mr. Silas Crow. As her betrothed, he has every right to know she's safe. Eloan's fork clattered against her plate. You had no right. On the contrary, I had every obligation. Edmund's smile was serpentine. He'll arrive within 2 days. With the proper documentation, naturally. Your father's consent to the marriage, and so forth. The room tilted. Crow. Coming here. With legal papers that would bind her to him like shackles. Caspian's hand slammed down on the table. You manipulative bastard. Your Grace. Edmund's tone dripped false concern. Such language in front of your ward. How very ungentlemanly. He turned to Eloan. Don't worry, my dear. Mr. Crow assured me he's most eager to reclaim his bride. Caspian stood so abruptly his chair crashed backward. For one terrible moment Eloan thought he'd actually strike Edmund. Consequences be damned. The magistrate clearly thought so too. He flinched despite his bravado. "Careful, Your Grace," Edmund murmured. "We wouldn't want Lady Helena hearing about any uncontrolled passions." Caspian left without another word, the door shaking in its frame. Eloan tried to follow, but Edmund's hand caught her wrist. His grip was soft, clammy, possessive. "A moment, Miss Blackwell." She yanked free. "Don't touch me." So much fire. He stepped closer, backing her against the sideboard. "I'll be direct. Marry me willingly, and I'll send Crow away with a story about your unfortunate demise in the storm. Or refuse, and I'll testify that His Grace thoroughly compromised you during your time alone. Either way, you'll never marry Crow. But one option gives you significantly more comfort." "You're despicable." "I'm practical." His breath was hot against her face. "Choose quickly, my dear. Crow arrives in 2 days." That night, Caspian made a show of settling on the floor with blankets, maintaining the fiction for Edmund's benefit. The magistrate had the second bedroom, but walls were thin. In the darkness, Caspian's whisper barely reached her. "I won't let him touch you. Or Crow. I swear it." "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "You don't owe me anything. You have Helena, your duty, your penance to pay. Because you deserve better than men who see you as a transaction." His voice was raw. "Because watching him threaten you made me want to commit violence I haven't felt since Adrian died. Because—" He stopped. "Just trust me. Please." She did. God help her, she did. Silas Crow arrived like a storm front, all cold authority and entitled rage. He was 50, well-dressed, with eyes like chips of flint. When he looked at Eloan, she became something smaller than human, an asset that had inconveniently wandered off. "Miss Blackwell." Not a greeting. Acclaiming. "You've caused considerable trouble." Eloan couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The years of dreading this moment had prepared her for nothing. Crow produced documents with theatrical precision, spreading them across the table. "Your late father's signature. A marriage contract with penalty clauses should either party default. £10,000, Miss Blackwell. I trust you don't have that sum lying about." "The contract is unconscionable," Caspian said, his voice ice. "No court would. Every court will uphold it. I've made certain." Crow's smile was reptilian. "I've also made inquiries about you, Your Grace. Thornmere Estate is mortgaged to the hilt. Your engagement to Lady Helena Ashford is your only path to solvency. You can't afford scandal." He turned back to Eloan. "Collect your things. We leave within the hour." "No," Caspian moved between them. "She's not going anywhere. You have no legal standing to interfere with a betrothed couple." "She's my betrothed, not my ward." The silence was deafening. Sir Edmund, lurking by the fireplace, practically purred with delight. How absolutely fascinating. Crow's eyes narrowed. "You're betrothed. How convenient. When, precisely, was this engagement formalized?" "That's none of your concern. Then you won't mind proving it in court." Crow gathered his papers with methodical care. "I'll file a claim of breach of contract and fraudulent interference tomorrow. Until the matter is resolved, Miss Blackwell comes with me. Tonight. Like hell she does. Your Grace." Crow's voice dropped to something uglier. "You're a duke playing at heroism you can't afford. I'm a businessman who always collects what I'm owed. Give her to me or I'll destroy you in court and take her anyway." Eloan found her voice finally, though it shook. "I won't go." Crow looked at her the way one might look at a dog that had forgotten its training. You don't have a choice. Hours later, after Crow had been temporarily stalled with threats of ducal influence and Edmund had retired with barely concealed glee, Caspian found Eloan alone by the window. I can stop this, he said quietly. But it means... He couldn't finish. Couldn't say the words that would make it real. Breaking his engagement to Helena meant losing Thornmere. Losing his last chance to honor Adrian's memory. Losing everything he'd built his entire identity around. But the alternative was watching Crow drag Eloan away like purchased goods. You'd ruin yourself, Eloan whispered. For me. His hand found hers in the darkness. I'd burn the world down before I let him have you. The truth hung between them, terrifying and inevitable. This had stopped being about duty the moment he'd touched her face and called her extraordinary. The inn had finally become accessible, and Edmund had insisted on dragging Crow there for the night. Propriety demanded it, he'd said with poisonous satisfaction. As if anything about this situation remained proper. For the first time in days, Eloan and Caspian were truly alone. She found him by the fire, staring into flames that cast shadows across his face. He looked hollowed out, ancient with exhaustion. Let me go, she said quietly. Crow has the law on his side. Edmund is circling like a vulture. And Helena. God, Caspian. Helena doesn't deserve this. Let me go, and you can salvage something from the wreckage. No. You've sacrificed enough. Your brother, your happiness, your future. I don't want the future I planned. He turned, and the rawness in his eyes stole her breath. I don't want duty. I don't want Helena and her father's money and a marriage built on penance. I want you, Eloan. I want you so much it terrifies me, and I don't know how to stop wanting you. Her heart fractured. Caspian. Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me I'm alone in this madness. She couldn't. I've been half in love with you since you wrapped me in your coat and looked at me like I was worth protecting. The distance between them evaporated. His hands cupped her face with devastating gentleness. Thumbs tracing her cheekbones like he was memorizing her. If we do this, there's no going back. Tomorrow brings consequences. Scandal. Ruin, probably. I know. Eloan. Her name was a prayer, a question, a plea. Are you sure? She answered by kissing him. He made a sound low in his throat. Surrender and desperation tangled together. His control shattered like ice, and suddenly she was pressed against him. His mouth hot and hungry on hers, 5 days of restraint burning away in seconds. I've never been more sure of anything, she breathed against his lips. They barely made it to the bed. Everything was urgent and tender and irrevocable. Hands learning skin, mouths mapping territory, whispered names in the darkness. When he finally claimed her, it felt like falling and flying simultaneously, like breaking apart and becoming whole. Afterwards, wrapped in his arms with her head against his thundering heart, reality crept back in. I'll find a way, Caspian whispered into her hair. I'll break the engagement. Face my father's fury. Lose Thornmere if I have to. But I won't lose you. I swear it. Eloan held him tighter. Fear coiling in her chest. What if promises aren't enough? What if Crow drags me to court? What if your father disowns you? What if? Then we'll face it together. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. No more running. No more sacrificing yourself to save everyone else. We fight for this. For us. She wanted desperately to believe him. Outside, the storm had finally broken. Dawn would come soon, bringing Edmund and Crow and all the consequences they'd deferred. But for now, in this stolen moment between night and morning, they held each other and pretended tomorrow might be kind. Morning light was cruel. Eloan woke wrapped in Caspian's arms, his breath warm against her neck, and for one perfect moment believed the world might let them keep this. Then hoofbeats shattered the illusion. The rider brought news like a death sentence. Lady Helena Ashford had arrived at the inn. She required an immediate audience with her betrothed. Caspian dressed in silence, each movement mechanical. When he finally looked at Eloan, his eyes held such anguish she had to look away. "I'll fix this," he said. A lie. They both knew it. She watched him ride away and felt the future crumbling like sand. He returned 2 hours later looking carved from marble. Beautiful, cold, and utterly unreachable. Eloan was already dressed, already braced for impact. What did she say? "Her father has obtained a special license. We marry in 3 days." His voice was empty of everything. "If I refuse, he'll call in every debt Thornmere owes. Immediately. The estate will be seized. Hundreds of families will lose their homes. So she's forcing your hand. She's protecting her investment." Something bitter twisted his mouth. Helena was remarkably pragmatic about the whole situation. "She doesn't care if I bedded you. She doesn't even care if I love her. This is business. Her father gets a ducal title for the family. I get to keep my tenants from starvation. Everyone wins. Except us." He flinched. "There is no us. There can't be. Last night was—" He couldn't finish. Pride came to Eloan's rescue, the same fierce pride that had kept her upright through years of her father's cruelty. "A mistake. I understand. Heat of the moment, the danger, the proximity. These things happen." She kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. "You should go to Helena. Honor your commitment. It's what duty demands. Eloan. Don't." She held up a hand. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." The sound of another carriage crunching over gravel interrupted them. Through the window, Eloan saw Silas Crow descending, legal documents tucked under his arm like weapons. "Time to go home, my dear," he called, not bothering to knock. "I've been patient long enough." Every instinct screamed at her to run, to fight, to beg Caspian to stop this. But she'd spent her whole life being a burden men wanted to escape. She wouldn't humiliate herself by clinging to someone who'd chosen duty over her. She gathered her borrowed cloak with shaking hands. "Eloan." Caspian's voice cracked on her name. "Please." "Goodbye, Your Grace." Formal. Final. "I hope you'll be very happy with Lady Helena." She walked past him before her composure could shatter. Crow took her arm with proprietary satisfaction, fingers digging into her flesh. As the carriage pulled away, she looked back once. Caspian stood in the doorway, hands fisted at his sides, jaw so tight she could see the muscle jumping. He looked like a man watching his own execution. Neither of them said goodbye. Neither had to. Breaking was a silent thing. Crow's London house was a mausoleum dressed in silk. Eloan moved through it like a ghost, nodding when spoken to, standing where directed, allowing herself to be fitted for a wedding dress she'd never wanted. The numbness was almost a mercy. If she let herself feel, she'd shatter completely. The wedding was planned for week's end. 5 days until she became Mrs. Silas Crow. She tried not to count the hours. Crow was hosting a dinner party, celebrating his impending nuptials, he said, though it felt more like displaying a trophy he'd won. Eloan sat at the table in borrowed jewels, silent and ornamental, while men discussed politics and profit. Sir Edmund Vane was among the guests. She hadn't known he'd be there. The sight of him made her skin crawl, but she kept her face blank. She'd become very good at blankness. The evening progressed. Wine flowed. Edmund's voice grew louder, his charm slipping into boastful cruelty. "The hunting lodge scheme was brilliant, if I say so myself," he announced, gesturing with his glass. "I knew the Duke would play hero and take her there. All I had to do was wait and catch them in compromise. Would have worked perfectly if Crow hadn't shown up early." The table went silent. Crow's face turned to stone. "What did you say?" "The robbery." Edmund was too drunk to notice the danger. "My men, my plan. I knew exactly where Thornmere would take her for shelter. I'd have had her grateful and ruined within days. Perfect for—" Crow stood so abruptly his chair crashed backward. "You orchestrated the robbery? You put my property at risk with your pathetic scheme." "Your property?" Edmund laughed. "She wasn't yours yet." Crow's fist caught him across the jaw. Edmund went down hard, blood spattering the expensive carpet. "Get out," Crow said, voice lethal. "Get out of my house before I have you arrested for conspiracy." Edmund fled, trailing apologies and blood. Eloan sat frozen, the truth settling over her like ice. The entire nightmare, the robbery, the lodge, the trapped nights that had led to everything, had been Edmund's manipulation from the start. They'd all been pieces in his game. And she was still Crow's prize. 200 miles away, Caspian stood in Thornmere's study while Helena's father raised a glass in drunken celebration. "Tomorrow you become family, Wolf. My grandchildren will be dukes." Lord Ashford swayed, port sloshing. "Have to admit, I thought you might call my bluff about the debts. But you're too honorable. Your estate's not even in that much trouble. I just needed leverage." The world stopped. "What did you say?" "The debts." Ashford laughed. "Exaggerated, mostly. You'd have been fine in a year or two. But I needed you desperate enough to agree. Needed the title for my line." He clapped Caspian's shoulder. "Smart business, eh?" Caspian's vision went white. He'd sacrificed Eloan, given her to Crow, watched her break, let her believe he'd chosen duty over her, for a lie. For manufactured crisis. For nothing. The engagement is over. Ashford's smile vanished. "What? Over? Finished? I won't marry your daughter. You'll be ruined. I'll call in every favor, destroy your reputation. Then destroy me." Caspian's voice was ice and fury. "But I won't marry Helena. Not for money. Not for duty. Not for anything." He was already moving, shouting for his horse, his mind racing. Crow's wedding was planned for week's end. 5 days. He had 5 days to find Eloan and undo the worst mistake of his life. London was 200 miles of hard riding. He'd make it in one. Thank you for watching this story. If you got to the end, I want you to know firsthand that I have an idea to create a series based on this characters. Do you want to hear more about Eloan and Caspian?